When in doubt, ladies and gents, blame an ism. Ava DuVernay claims racism and sexism is to blame for audiences being more excited about Oppenheimer than a Isabel Wilkerson biopic origin. I mean, it couldn't possibly be the fact that no one's ever heard of this movie. It's not being promoted. I've never even heard of this. I talk about films for a living. I've never heard of Origin. At all. The trailer I keep seeing on YouTube, for instance, and also around the web, is for The Creator. A movie I personally cannot wait to see. Very excited for that. This, though, never heard of it. You know, it also couldn't possibly be that, you know, Oppenheimer was directed by, just a small-time director, Christopher Nolan, and Ava DuVernay is essentially a nobody. You know, no one knows really who she is. She has directed flops. It couldn't possibly be the historical relevance or significance of Oppenheimer either, could it? No, couldn't possibly be the fact that Oppenheimer was slammed with Barbie and became a meme, you know, Barbenheimer. No, must be an ism. So according to director Ava DuVernay, the lack of interest in her upcoming Isabel Wilkerson biopic Origin compared to the similarly structured Oppenheimer has nothing to do with the latter's historical importance and everything to do with audience's own racist and sexist attitudes. Bunch of isms and ists, ladies and gents. So, just as a bit of a background, I literally have no idea who this person is, just as an FYI. So, born in 1961, Wilkerson is perhaps best known for having been, per the National Association of Black Journalists, the first black journalist to win a Pulitzer Prize for individual reporting and first black woman to win a journalism Pulitzer. The 1994 winner in the feature writing category, Wilkerson received the award from Columbia University for her profile of a fourth grader from Chicago's South Side and for 2 stories reporting on the Midwestern flood of 93. Cool, I guess. So from there, Wilkerson would go on to spend roughly 15 years researching and authoring The Warmth of Other Suns, the epic story of America's Great Migration. Released in 2010 to widespread praise from mainstream media outlets, the book provides a historical examination of 3 popular routes taken by black Americans in emigrating north from the southern United States between 1915 and 1970. I mean, it sounds reasonably interesting. I'd have absolutely no interest in this remotely, but it seems reasonably interesting, I guess, for those people that care. So 10 years later, Wilkerson next published Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. As described by the book's publisher Penguin Random House, Caste argues that America today and throughout its history have been shaped by a hidden caste system, a rigid hierarchy of human rankings. To go a step further, beyond race, class, or other factors, there is a powerful caste system that influences people's lives and behaviour and the nation's fate. Linking the caste system of America, India and Nazi Germany, Wilkerson explores 8 pillars that underlie caste systems across civilizations, including divine will, bloodline, stigma, and more. Less interesting, quite frankly. So it's Wilkerson's argument in caste, as well as a general life story that inspired DuVernay to adapt the book into a semi-biographical film about the journalist. So she spoke about this to Variety's Angelique Jackson, the woman once attached to helm DC's New Gods. This is Ava DuVernay, explained. It has biographical elements, so in some ways it's a biopic, in some ways it's a docudrama, in some ways it's just a straight up adaptation of these really beautiful and tragic moments in history. The goal was to try to stitch together a tapestry to create a quilt. That's how I think of it, and allow myself to colour outside the lines of what I've been told. Just to throw all that out and tell the story from my gut, and it came from reading this book. So it's absolutely not anything. It's got nothing to do with it. Then it's not biographical. It's not historical. Then is it? Anyway, look. Here's the trailer. I can see already it's being distributed by Neon. They don't promote films very well. They don't have wide releases. They're not massive budget films. They're not high on people's agenda. A Christopher Nolan film is a bigger budget film than this. It gets promoted. It's got a bigger name attached to it. But remember, ladies and gents, it's isms and ists. So the core piece of the puzzles are true. The losses that she experienced in the film were real losses that Isabel Wilkerson herself endured. The very short amount of time, less than 2 years, in which these losses happened is true. The fact that she worked and wrote this book in the amount of time in which her grief was at full throttle when she was going through this deep loss is fact. And the fact that she came out with something so transformative and triumphant in the book Cast was to me a story in and of itself, separate and apart from what she shares and teaches in the book. The film tries to align both stories, personal drama and our cultural trauma, and understand that the only way to solve or heal any of this is to walk through it. And the film tries to walk people through both. It just sounds like a fucking lecture. Sorry. And also, this is realistically only going to appeal to Americans, and actually only a very small amount of Americans. This is a very niche film. A very, very niche film. So following further discussions regarding a time working on the film, DuVernay was eventually pressed by Jackson. What does it take to get the audience to watch a movie like Origin? And here we go. Because midway through I realised this is a process film, the reporter elaborated on our initial question. A movie about someone making something. I just had a conversation about She Said, which I loved, and I was frustrated because it feels like when there's process films about women and people of colour, people are not as intrigued. I don't know that this is a fair question to ask you, but I'm curious what you make of the way to get the audience in the door, because it is complicated when asking people to watch material that is challenging. You're not asking people, you present it, and if they're interested, they'll watch it. In turn, DuVernay unsurprisingly blamed the existence of this challenge on the inherent racism and sexism on general audiences. That's right, because Barbie wasn't a massive smash hit. Oh, there must only be sexist to black people, I guess. Fucking dunces. You're right, the director affirmed in reply. It's challenging to watch a process film about a man making a bomb. He's a man who was trying to do something and couldn't quite describe it to anybody else, but he knew it. Isabel is a woman who knows something and can't quite describe it, but she knows it, and she's going to find it. You'll sit through 3 hours of his process, will you sit through 2 hours of her process? You're literally talking about a film that went up against the biggest film of the year, and you're trying to cry sexism. You are monumentally moronic. I think that this is the only proposition. It's not talking about the merit of the films. It's talking about the very idea of following a woman through an intellectual process, an intellectual exercise. Oh, there you go, ladies and gents. She's separating Barbie in her film because hers is an intellectual process. That's how she justifies it. Then you make that a black person. Then you make that a black woman. Is it valid enough for you to go on that journey with her? Is it interesting enough for me to sit down for 2 hours? Probably not, no. So I can't be bothered. This literally is a niche within a niche. Anyway, oh, fuck these people. Concluding her thoughts on the biopic, DuVernay poised. If you're looking at films like She Said or Women Talking, there's a real question as to what it takes to centre that voice and that narrative. We've been trained for that centre. We've been trained that centre is not usually the centre. That voice usually is off-centre, or the minor character, or not usually in this movie. I'm excited to be making work at a time where you have Nomadland, and you have She Said, and you have women talking, and these women are being centred in these ways. It's about an intellectual as well as emotional pursuit, and that they are the centre of the story. I hope that Origin joins that canon of films. Probably not. Because as of writing, the film distributor Neon has acquired the release rights to Origin. There's no release schedule. There's no promotion of it. And this sounds like absolute doo-doo. But again, ladies and gents, remember, when in doubt, just blame a bunch of isms. You're just an ism and an ist, didn't you know?